This trip was the most insane, most real, most fucked up, and scariest experience I have definitely had in my life. Please bear with me for the long essay. I really think you will find this thrilling, a life-changing event for me. I'm going to go into a little bit of my personal history. This is extremely personal, and I have not told anybody except for one person about this in my entire life. I was molested when I was younger. After all of these years, I finally said it. Now, I was very young, but I do remember it very well. The entire situation was fucked up. Because this happened, I grew up a very different lifestyle than most every other person. The part that sucks about this story is that I didn't know that this happened until about 9th grade. My parents did not tell me or mention anything about this to me, ever, to this day. I always had an idea that something bad did happen in my youth, but I could never really quite remember it. One day, coming home from school, my dad and I were talking about some good times we had back in our old house. He started talking and rambled on quite some time. One of the things that he said really reminded me about everything that happened. He mentioned the time when a mentally challenged guy was arrested. Somehow, he had just said it. He started to talk about the story and then paused in mid-sentence. Suddenly, he changed subjects and started to talk about something else. All I could do was think and figure out why he just suddenly started talking about everything else. I then started feeling chills go down my back. I felt blood rush to my head, and a dozen flashbacks hit me real hard. These flashbacks were all from the time that I was molested. I remember many cops surrounding me, holding me, and asking me all sorts of questions as I watched this guy get arrested and put in the back of a police car. I was bombarded with so much I couldn't even handle it. In the car, driving with my dad, I could not say a word. I was stunned and shocked as I felt all these fucked up emotions hitting my body. It took me a lot to get over this. The next few months, I quite literally resorted to drugs to stop me from thinking about this terrible incident. It was really unbearable and was too much for me to handle. I contemplated suicide very often for the next year. I would take pills out of my parents' medicine cabinets and just take a variety of what I thought might make me feel better and forget about the shit that I went through. I visited the hospital a few times that year from passing out taking too many of these pills. I always told my parents that it was just an asthma attack or that I thought I broke a bone. I told the doctors what happened and asked if they wouldn't tell my parents. I knew that the doctors simply lied to my face because a week after, my parents hired me a psychologist. Despite that, I completely ignored the psychologist in every meeting that I had with him. My relationship with my parents went to shit, and I don't think I can ever respect them for doing what they did and not telling me what happened to me in my youth. Eventually, I got over the suicide attempts and stopped seeing the psychologist. My drug abuse only grew larger. My parents had no idea what I was doing. Almost every single day, I would find a new way to put some sort of drug in my body to feel good about my life. As time passed, I told myself that I would never bring this up again. Then, while working in a movie theater in 11th grade, my 40-year-old manager, female, started to stalk me. This situation eventually got really bad. She sent me love letters weekly, tried touching me sexually, and she scheduled every shift I worked with her. I eventually took action, but things got worse. I was threatened in person and through letters. From her pressure, I was unsure what I wanted to do. Therefore, I backed off. My general manager kept on pressuring me, trying to get me to show him some hard evidence because he did not believe my accusations. He was being a real asshole and didn't want to deal with this sort of trouble. I had multiple emotional breakdowns. Thoughts and memories of this and my childhood raced through my memory every night. Taking all of this in was extremely tough. I did eventually tell this one girl that I really trusted about my entire past. One of the most difficult things I have ever done. Now, here's what happened on my diphenhydramine trip. A brief history. I am an alcoholic and addicted to drugs. I love experimenting with the unreal and will experiment with any drug pushing my body to the limits. The previous weekend, I was drinking heavily with my dad, brother, and my dad's friends. Sunday night, when I got back on campus, I did 2 full Dex trips in one night. First, 13 quercetin, 5 Comtrax, a half bottle of Delsin, 2 shots of NyQuil, and 2 Dayquil. Second night, I had 3/4 bottles of Delsin, 3 Comtrax, and 2 Dayquil. I was fucked up and tripping hard. I had a great time. The next night, I researched Diphenhydramine. I took 600 milligrams. I weigh 77 kilograms. The trip was an ultra-realistic trip. My body weighed a lot. It was very difficult to speak and walk correctly. A friend and I were in another friend's dorm for about 30 minutes. I didn't think that I was tripping at all. All of a sudden, everyone, except my other tripping buddy, disappeared. It was insanely real. My friend just stared at me and said everyone left 15 minutes ago for a cigarette. All throughout the night, I heard voices and had conversations with myself and with people that were not there. It was intense, lasted about 45 minutes. The next night, I did the same thing, except with 700 milligrams. I had already drank at least 5 beers. I was doing just fine until I noticed everything was changing in my body. I sort of stood there for a second and remember someone asking me if I was alright. As soon as that display of concern registered in my head, my body weighed 1,000 pounds. I could not move at all. My brain completely removed itself from my body and I fell to the ground. I was shaking and my eyes rolled to the back of my head. I could hear everyone talking still, I think. All I heard were random words like hospital, puke, die, fall, bad trip, and more words relating to concern. Each word that I heard felt like 100 people punching me in every part of my body at the exact same time. I was then lifted into the air and dragged to the toilet. I felt a finger go into my throat, but my gag reflexes were shot. Eventually, it all stopped. I opened my eyes, and I was in my bed at my old neighborhood, where I was molested. I remember looking into the mirror and being the height of a 10-year-old. What seemed like months, I relived my entire experience explained above. I kept jumping to different parts of my life, not knowing what was real and what wasn't, even though everything looked so damn real. Every time I switched to a new location, I was waking up. I had no idea if I was tripping or not. I must have been in at least 10 to 15 places. The last one was in my old theater that I worked at. My manager was there and started asking me questions about being molested. There were only 2 people that knew about this, and he was not one of them. He continues to walk towards me, growing in size, while I was getting smaller. Every time I tried to say stop, my mouth would open and nothing would come out. He then started telling me to just admit it, to just say that I was molested. As his voice grew, others joined in, chanting, "Just say it," louder and louder. I even tried to say it, but I just couldn't. I was scared out of my mind. All of a sudden, I broke out of this hole. I was in a comfortable place in the middle of nowhere. Grass was miles in every direction, and I just said it in front of everybody. I woke up in my bed again. Everything was real, but it wasn't. I felt like I jumped through multiple layers of reality. At this point, I actually remembered and figured out that I was tripping insanely. I started walking around trying to figure out ways to break out of it, to wake up. Every now and then, I would recognize something, my head would snap, and I would wake up in my bed again. I remember having discussions with all sorts of people, but I don't remember who was real and who was fake. I would hear voices all around me, and there would be no one around. I walked around my dorm at 10 p.m. smoking a cigarette in front of everybody. I had very crazy talks with one of my friends about evolution, religion, culture, and science. I had problems remembering names and would call people the completely wrong name and thinking that I was just saying their name. I remember finally breaking a reality and peeking into the real world at around 3 p.m. Then, I blacked out. I finally woke up in the morning, still skeptical whether or not this world was real. All day today, I have been getting constant flashbacks, which is helping me fill in the blanks to my story. I am skeptical to this moment right here, typing this paper. I could really be in a dream right now. Maybe I'm just dreaming that I look like this. My friends were telling me all this crazy shit that I did last night. I had conversations with myself and would answer back as two other different people. My tongue got really large, and every time I started to talk, my teeth would just bite down on my tongue, painlessly. I have never tripped so hard in my entire life. This drug officially wins my #1 on craziest drug out there. More intense than acid, shrooms, DMT, DXM, ecstasy, ayahuasca, opiates, and any other one that I've tried before. I am really sorry for the people I scared last night. I'm glad they were there to help me though. If you are reading this and you know me, please respect and don't mention the personal stuff that went on in my life with me or to anyone else. I need to get over it myself. If I need someone to talk to, I'll come to you. You might notice me having a little trouble for a few days. It's the night after my insane trip, and I'm still getting flashbacks, having trouble walking, and my tongue fucking hurts.
Having been interested in acid and other hallucinogens in the past, but being unable to obtain them, when I found out about diphenhydramine, I was immediately interested. So, one night, when I didn't have school the next day, I bought a pack of Benadryl Allergy. My roommate was in the room for the trip, but unaware that I was tripping. I didn't want to alarm him. He wouldn't have turned me in, but I didn't want to be a bother. But I figured, if worse comes to worse, he would be there if I needed him. I started off slow, with 10 tablets, 250 milligram. About after an hour or so, nothing happened. It was at this time that my roommate turned off the lights and went to bed, only lights now being from the window and my computer. I took 2 more tablets and waited half an hour. Having read another report and computing the dosages taken, I took 5 more tablets for a total of 425 milligrams in my system. Then I lay down and waited for it to begin. My limbs were trembly and spasmed every now and then. Laying down was very uncomfortable. About half an hour later, the ceiling took on a weird, gelatinous appearance, consistent with other reports. I then decided to get up and listen to a little music. But I didn't hear any distortion of the music, but I could hear my name being called over it. After turning off the music, I turned to see a black woman in a cape and a large fur hat sitting next to my roommate. She explained to me that he was very sick and that she needed to heal him. She also told me not to be alarmed, so I turned my back to the computer. This episode took about half an hour. At this point, the trip turned nasty. I can't explain why, although I believe it may be because the additional 5 pills hit my system. I am notorious for leaving dirty dishes around the room, and the light from my computer fell on one of them, but it wasn't normal. It was moving. On closer inspection, it was filled with thousands of clear baby spiders. I screamed, but it was only in my head, as my roommate didn't wake up. Looking away, I tried to focus on the computer. I felt something brush my foot, but I didn't look down. However, I saw a flicker of movement near the edge of my desk. Slowly, what looked up like a huge, furry pipe cleaner rose came up from the edge. It then tensed itself and pulled up a giant wolf spider whose body was about the size of my head, with gigantic legs, looking away. I could see 4 or 5 more of them, all running very fast, like cheetah speed, along the floor. Gritting my teeth, I slipped on my shoes and ran quickly outside my room. I was in the main hall of my floor, where it was considerably brighter. Now, I was fully locked in a delusional reality. I went to the bathroom nervously, checking around for spiders. Urination was painful, but was over quickly. I went to the drinking fountain, drank, and heard a growl from my left. There was a blue tabby cat with distorted features and big fangs. It growled at me and ran very fast and leapt at the air. I would put up my arm, and it exploded in midair. The fragments turned into long, beaked flatworms with beady red eyes. They huddled together and screamed shrilly at me. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, they were gone. I couldn't stay in this hallway, but was not about to go back to the spiders. Opening up my door confirmed that they were still there. I decided to go into the main lounge of the building, into public, or at least public at 1:30 a.m. Running quickly down the stairs, I reached the lounge with no more events. I sat down for a moment because I was badly dizzy and my heart was racing. I would have measured my pulse, but I didn't have a clock nearby. 3 people walked by and asked what I was doing. I said that I couldn't sleep and that I was down here to keep from waking up. Both my voice and theirs sounded hollow and echoey, and I was slurring very badly. They eventually gave up and walked away. I'm almost sure that they were real, because closing my eyes didn't remove them, although it didn't remove the spiders either. I paced around the lounge for a while, but upon seeing a pair of spiders fighting, the normal-sized ones this time, I walked quickly in the opposite direction. I found out shortly that I was walking in the direction of the most horrifying hallucination yet. Reaching a series of benches, I was about to sit down when I saw movement under the bench. In the shadows was a large, bumpy shape. I moved a little to see what it was. I couldn't scream. It was a giant crab, about the size of my torso, excluding legs and claws. The claws were about the size of my arms, and clicked together horribly. It had a pug's face, with deadly yellow eyes. One of the worms from before, now brown, protruded from the back of the shell. There were other, smaller, more normal crabs behind it. One of the claws would spasm from time to time. Although I had no grip on time, I must have stared at it, barely breathing, for 10 minutes or more. I ran full speed back to where the spiders were battling. It was then that I realized that one of them was not a spider at all. It was one of the worms, this lime green, with thousands of gossamer-thin legs, that it used to spin silk into thin nets and lassos. I saw about 4 or 5 more of them through the course of my trip. I spent the rest of the night pacing back between the 2 horrors until I could see the sun coming up outside. I then went back to my room where the spiders had disappeared, and I went promptly to bed. I can't remember if I dreamed or not. The next day, I felt very fatigued, and my arms shook like Parkinson's disease. I felt very sick to my stomach. No hallucinations persisted, although I had trouble balancing and sometimes seemed to slip while walking. These symptoms faded after a few hours. Although this was a terrible nightmarish experience, I've not ruled out using it again. After some time has passed, probably at a lower dosage as well, should a second bad trip occur, it will likely end my experimentation with this drug. However, I cannot, in good conscience, recommend this experience to anyone else. This definitely has a harsh quality about it, even without the nightmarish hallucinations.
"3 days ago, I did one of the most stupidest things I have ever done in my life. Even after reading several experience reports on taking Benadryl recreationally and how bad of an idea it was, I decided to give it a try. Over a period of 4 hours, I ingested 16 pills. I started with 6, took 4 more an hour later, then 3 each hours afterwards. I didn't know what time it was during any of the trip, but I do remember quite a few things that happened during it. I'll list and explain the things as well as I can. 6 of the 25 milligram pills did nothing but make me feel extremely heavy and tired. A half hour after taking another 4, I started to feel a weird euphoric sensation in my back. I noticed something definitely strange about my vision, so I went to the bathroom to see what was up. My pupils were the largest I've ever seen them. I've taken many other hallucinogens that have dilated my pupils, but never to this extent. I could hardly see a ring of color at all. A friend of mine who was spending the night said that I looked half dead. I should have stopped there at 10 pills, but I took another 3, and then another 3 an hour later. There's a very toxic component to the trip. This I know because I felt poisoned. I felt like I had eaten some Jimson weed or any other dangerous deliriant. The visuals that I got were nothing like visuals on tryptamines. There were actual objects appearing around me that were not actually there. The hardwood floor was shifting and swirling. It was hard to walk on it. Not because I had difficulty keeping my balance, but because it felt like the ground was constantly moving around. When I sat still and tried focusing on something, it wouldn't work. My eyes would focus on things very far away, then very close. Sometimes my eyes would strain, and it would hurt really bad because it was so hard to focus on anything. I eventually couldn't take being inside the house anymore, so I came and sat on my front porch and looked all around. At this point, the visuals were actually somewhat enjoyable. Light posts were swaying back and forth vigorously, trees were appearing in my yard, changing positions, etc. Grass and plants seemed to shrink and then grow larger than before, then start bubbling like boiling water. I would see moving objects in my peripheral vision, and it was very hard to keep from becoming paranoid. The trip seemed to plateau. I wasn't feeling a come up at all anymore, just a strange feeling of being poisoned. I was delirious at this point. I hardly knew what I was doing, but I wasn't acting a complete fool. My friend had to go home and my parents were asleep, so I stayed in my room frightened. Something made me think that there were intruders in the house, and at times I would get a blanket and throw it over myself in the corner of the room, just to get up a few seconds later wondering what the hell I was doing. As the paranoia seemed to subside, I listened to music on my computer and tried to talk to a few people online. Text was illegible. It looked like a foreign language. I wrote down "never again" on a piece of paper, and the next day I looked at it and it was just gibberish. Sitting at my desk, I would occasionally say something to a friend and get a response. He was sitting behind me on my bed, or so I thought. I would go on into deep conversations at times, just to turn around and see no one in my room. This gave me intense chills a few times, and I must admit, I was very scared. I started hearing phones ringing, people yelling, conversations going on in other rooms, radios playing, and all sorts of stuff that just wasn't really happening. I could not distinguish the trip from reality anymore. I was completely freaked out, and the visuals would not stop. I ran into the bathroom and looked into the mirrors. I don't know why or how it happened, but the mirrors were completely black. It was as though someone put a sheet of black marble all over them. I started touching my face and my hair. Everything felt alien to me. I looked into the toilet and the water was boiling. The shower curtains were swaying all over the place, crinkling and then straightening out. Some of the oddest visuals I've ever had in my life. A friend called me. I was talking to him on the phone. I was talking all right, and I could understand him. I told him what had happened, and he was asking if I was sure everything would be okay. I talked to him for about 20 minutes in all, but at about every 5 minutes that went by, I'd zone out and start talking about something that had nothing to do with the conversation at hand. I remember saying, "Yeah, we should still have them if my mom isn't going to use it to make dinner," and my friend asking me what the bloody hell I was talking about. I finally got the guts to smoke weed, so I broke up 3 bowls worth and sucked them down pretty fast. This helped the trip significantly. I didn't feel as confused and as fucked as I did before, and I actually started to feel tired again and decided that it'd be best to try to sleep. I turned the lights out, terrible idea, and laid down. The bed shook and bounced wildly. almost to the point of making me feel like I had to vomit. I dealt with this for about 45 minutes and ended up falling asleep for a mere 2 hours. I woke up, still tripping, and smoked some more, and then went back to bed. I ended up doing this 5 times in all before morning. My weed stash was completely gone, my room was messed up, and my bed was pulled out from the wall into the middle of the room. Even in the morning, I was still tripping. Outside, sometimes I'd trip over stuff because I didn't see it there. It's funny because the night before I was seeing things that weren't there. Now, I'm not seeing things that are there. I almost got hit by a car that I didn't see or hear. I still had feelings of people being around me at times, and then I'd say something and look back at them, and they were not there. The whole next day, I was still tripping to a certain extent. Diphenhydramine isn't something to play around with. I imagine that it's very toxic at recreational doses, and it's really easy to do something stupid to yourself or other people while intoxicated on it. The likenesses between diphenhydramine and the Jimson weed alkaloids are remarkable. At some points during the trip, I felt the same way as I did when I tried Jimson weed, just completely delirious and freaked out of my mind. It's been 3 days since the trip, and I gotta admit, I still don't feel back to normal. I keep getting sharp stomach and chest pains. I get confused easily. My appetite has changed. My throat hurts really bad on the right side, and I guess I just have a hard time realizing what's going on. At some points, I feel like I have done permanent damage to myself, but I'm still going to have to wait a few more days for the stuff to get out of my body. There's already enough trip reports telling you not to do this. I'm not going to tell you not to do it. Just read what happened to me, and if that really intrigues you, go ahead and do it. I personally don't believe that anyone would be seeking the effects that recreational doses of diphenhydramine can give. It's too toxic, too scary, and too dangerous.
First comes the sinking feeling. Subtle. It grows stronger, like my body is oozing into lead, dragging my heart down to the floor. It's a slow, rhythmic movement down, like a nail banged even deeper, inward, by the potent chemical hammer I've just got swinging inside of me. John Henry is taking a chisel to my brain, and he's not stopping till it's cracked. My mind is falling, a downward spiral into a cave, splashing into the water, bobbing around the murky mist. Into the fog. Everything is different, yet everything is the same. Looking around the room, I can see all of the furniture where it should be, just sitting there. Everything is fine, but things are off. The borders move around, twisting between realities. A swarm of colored dots, like bats, fill my vision, before getting lost in the light of clarity shining down at me from the cave's opening. I enjoy it now. I know it won't be long before I'm swept away, before I'm diving downward into the cold, lonely depths of insanity. The diphenhydramine is hitting. I counted the pills over and over at 10, deciding how much to do. Anxiety ever growing. Finally, I got the strength to down them, swallowing the handful with a strained gulp. No going back now. It's been almost an hour. I'm feeling normal. I'm feeling fine. Then there is this large buzz building in the back of my brain, like a fever sneaking in on me. I'm turning into lead. I'm sinking. Boom. The fear hits. I hear a crack. My mind is in shock for a second, reeling 1,000 miles per hour backwards. I'm back. I'm fine again, but I know it's starting. I've dove straight into insanity. I'm in another reality now, slipping in between worlds. First sign is the change. I hear spare change falling down around me like rain, going for a bit, then stopping. I'm used to this, though. The change comes raining down every time the drill is involved. I'm enjoying this. Purple blobs and dots dance on the walls. Bouts of double vision come and go. I keep hearing voices. I can't make out the words, though. I'm still rooted in the real. Clarity will come. Soon I've passed this. I'm now deep within the sea of lunacy. My mind is spinning. I'm in my kitchen, drinking some water. I got to get an iced tea from the kitchen. Bam. I'm in my room. No iced tea. I go downstairs, get the same iced tea. The can is closed. I look down again. It's open. It's like I'm slipping in and out of time. The order is all wrong. The dementia is hitting now. I'm no longer feeling cold. I get flashes of heat. I feel sick, dizzy. My mind is fried. 1 second, I'm in my basement hearing change fall. Next, I'm talking to my 10th grade English teacher. We're discussing my trip and what I can learn while I'm out of my home world. I turn around. He's gone. I realize what's going on. I realize the hallucination. Or was it? I hear the doorbell ring. At one point, I don't dare go down though. I eventually end up at the door, standing on the step, waiting for 10 minutes. But then I realize they must have left 30 minutes ago. I wonder if I really heard my doorbell. I ring it to get the sound in my ears. Was that me who rung it? Am I going back through time? Is the odor of my senses and my memory all messed up? It's getting hotter and hotter. The world is turning into straight shapes, black and white. Dark purple splotches over everything. I'm in a hot machine world. It's twisting around me, moving me from place to place. I'm growling, growing, sicker and sicker. I've lost free will. I'm led by fate, like a fly stuck in a spider's web. I'm flung around, my fate's weaving. I move from place to place, back again. Huge holes fill my memory at every turn. It must be around 2 or 3 now. I decide I need to take a shower. I get in the hot water and zone out. I can no longer feel so hot when I get out. I'm calm. I go to lie down in my room. It's pitch black. Lightning sparks across my closed eyelids. A fierce internal storm. I'm stuck in the calm eye. I feel totally relaxed. My muscles loosen. Shapes dance across my mind, back and forth. I'm disconnected from the world. Then I see it. I've seen it on Diphenhydramine before. The eye of insanity. A bright, amorphous blob bobbing in my vision. Bright, reddish-purple swirling around. An iris with a void in the center that draws me forward. I'm staring into the eyes of insanity. I realize this is in the back of my mind. I've called it this before, in writing, and thus remember it as such, but only subconsciously, in a vague sense. I'm in a total trance. I'm leaving this world. I can feel myself drifting downward, slowly spiraling back into myself. The eyes gaze and mine interlocked. This hallucination keeps for a long while. As I feel myself falling further down, I can feel my pulse, feel every organ moving. I can hear every breath. I have no control. Then, nothing. It's like a third plateau, Dex trip. I'm hypnotized, without sense, almost without ego. Then I'm conscious. I must have come back up from that place in my sleep. I awake, deep in my chemical fog. I feel like shit. My mouth is a desert. My head pounds. My eyes sting. I get up and drink some water, then back to sleep. This process is repeating many times. Finally, I drag myself back up. I've returned to my world, to my origin. Things seem off. They still do. Did I fuck up my brain on drugs? Or my brain fuck up my world on drugs? Have I twisted everything, or has everything twisted to me? I can't tell. I've traveled outside and come back through into a haze. I've felt like shit for a day or so. All things came back to normal, except my mind. It's an interesting experience, diving into the fate's hands, giving up control, and staring into lunacy for a while, letting myself Out the door. When I come back, everything is the same. But I'm not. I have the same views as before, but also new ones I've gained while lost. It wasn't introspective like the third, more a loss of all grounding, which having experienced, it has left me to think and believe in the whole new ways. A strange trip, but one worth remembering.
The absolute worst experience of my life occurred this year. I was in absolute distress due to some issues that had continued with my longtime boyfriend. Anyway, these issues resulted in me taking 30 pills of Walgreens brand generic sleep aid, the active ingredient being diphenhydramine, 25 milligrams per pill. I remember taking them at around 11 p.m. to 12 a.m. I laid down and turned on the TV to watch Netflix. At about 1 a.m., my legs began to spasm and my body felt extremely heavy. I managed to knock out and fall asleep, or so I thought. I was completely unaware of the time, but the next thing I knew, I was in a club talking to a female bartender. There were bright lights and very loud music, and I even recall dancing. Before I knew it, I looked at the bartender right in the face as she was giving me a strange look. I then realized this bartender was me. I was hallucinating the whole thing and looking at my own face in the mirror. Once I realized this, I was terrified, so I went to go speak to my grandmother. Only her and I live in the house. I sat on the bed and was speaking to her in what I thought was a normal manner. However, she does not speak any English, and that was the language I was speaking to her in. This left her very confused, so she told me to go to sleep. I came back to my room and stared at the ceiling. I thought I had fallen asleep at this point. However, I remember getting up once again and going to check on my small brown chihuahua. When I arrived to the laundry room, which is where he sleeps, I saw him laying there lifeless. I smelled flesh rotting, and I saw many ants scattered across the floor and was convinced that my dog had gotten killed and eaten by ants. I was hysterical at this point, and I ran out of the room crying to my grandmother. She told me the dog was outside and asked me what I was on. I told her I didn't know, as I had honestly forgotten about taking the pills. I then reached for my phone. This is when all hell broke loose. I saw a text from my boyfriend that stated he was leaving me and staying in Austin. He was on a cruise at the time, and for some reason, I decided to drive to his house. He never sent this text. I imagined it. Well, I ended up running to my car, and my grandma stopped me before I was able to leave. I was convinced she had taken my keys, which triggered me to attempt to take them back. She kept telling me she didn't have them. This spectacle led to the neighbors calling the cops. A police officer, which embarrassingly turned out to be a family friend, arrived at my house and was questioning me. I imagined I was smoking a cigarette and was even making the motion of ashing it. This alarmed the police officer as I was practicing many strange behaviors. I was speaking to people that weren't there. I was thinking that I was smoking when I wasn't, and I could not, for the life of me, get dressed. It became the most confusing task to me. To make things worse, I lost my glasses and my contacts, so during the whole thing, I was completely blind. Mind you, I could barely see 5 inches past my nose. Well, I ended up in the hospital. They wanted to keep me there for a month because they believed I had schizophrenia. Even at the hospital, I was hallucinating many horrible things. This lasted until the following day, when I finally convinced the doctor that I was fine and needed to go home. The moral of this story is that this drug is evil. I honestly felt as if I died and was living in hell. It was completely terrifying.